What's up guys, it's your favorite Kiwi coach and give me 6 months of your time and I'll give you the best golf swing of your life. So welcome back to the channel. If you guys are new to the channel, we do videos about before and afters of our clients. We do videos about professional golf swing analysis. We do videos like we're doing today where we're talking about the shallow swing. So if you're interested in the golf swing, if you're interested in golf instruction, this is the perfect channel for you, and let's go ahead and jump in. But before we get into the video, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, and that is Kiwi Golf Japan. So after this video is done, I want you guys to go check out the link in the description because YouTube does not pay our bills, and if you didn't know, the membership site that we have pays our bills. So if you want to get access to 260 plus videos and you want to help support this channel, check out the link after this video to our Kiwi Platinum membership. We'd love to have you as a member. Now, let's go get into the video. So in today's particular video, we're going to be talking about the shallow swing, and it's important to know when we talk about the shallow swing, there's a really massive difference between what Americans would maybe talk about when they're talking about shallowing, or the shallow swing you could call it, and then typically what the Japanese are going to be talking about when they talk about the shallow swing. So the main point in today's video is I really want you guys to understand the differences between the two so you can really differentiate, which one maybe you would like to choose. And then from there, hopefully I can give a little bit of my personal opinion on, what do I think about shallowing? What do I think about the shallow swing? So let's go hop into the first point. We're going to talk about the basics of typically what you're going to hear in Japan when you hear about the shallow swing. So even in Japan, when you look on YouTube and you look up the shallow swing and you look at all the different videos, each instructor has a little bit different approach to what they're talking about when they're talking about the shallow swing. So in this particular video, I'm going to be mainly talking about the highlights that we typically see taught here in Japan. But again, what I say here might not be what all of the instructors here in Japan are saying. I totally get that. But this is by far definitely a pretty good summary of what most Japanese golf instructors are talking about when they're talking about the shallow swing. So let's start out with the highlight of the shallow swing, which is typically the transition. So in Japan, when most golf instructors are talking about the shallow swing, they're specifically talking about really this relationship between the grip and the club head right here in transition. You want to see the club head start to move back towards the ground like this and get slightly more into almost a horizontal position, right? But the main point here is we want to see a twisting in the shaft. That is going to be the main highlight point when you hear people talk about the shallow swing here in Japan. Now, if you actually wanted to do this, and this is not something I recommend you do, but if you wanted to do this, really the direct correlators to this motion is going to be in what torque you apply to the club shaft. So let me kind of explain that. So if I get this grip in here and I get it to travel on an angle that looks almost kind of like this, right? Almost like a little bit of a hook or a fish hook right here. If I get the grip in to travel on that motion, as you can see, that would twist the club shaft. And that's typically what you'll hear most golf instructors talk about when they're talking about this flattening of the club shaft or the shallowing of the club shaft. That's what they mean. So for the highlight point number one, that's going to be the transition move, and that's going to be in Japan, they want to see this club shaft actually flattening in transition. Now, let's get into more so the American standpoint, and let's kind of explain what they typically mean when they talk about shallowing. So maybe back in the day when George Gankus was a lot more popular, a lot of the golf instructors were actually physically talking about flattening of this club shaft as well. But recent days, you're actually seeing a pretty different understanding, a pretty different, explanation of this move when you see American instructors teach it. Nowadays, what you're actually seeing a lot of people talk about is really no flattening at all. You're actually seeing a lot of people talk about, and this is the same thing that I personally prefer as well, taking the relationship between the club head and the grip end and actually just lowering this in transition. So almost trying to minimize flattening or steepening or any type of twist in transition. So as you can see, between the shallow swing that maybe people are talking about in America versus the shallow swing that you're talking about here in Japan, there already is a pretty massive difference between the two. So that's something that you should think about. All right, so the next highlight we're going to get into, and this is going to be typically how Japanese instructors would teach this. Again, not all Japanese instructors, I'm just saying for the most part, who teach the shallow swing, this is what they will be teaching. And they're going to be teaching a takeaway where you're trying to get the grip in of the club to actually beat the club head as you move the hands back. So the takeaway is going to look much more this way, and then later in the swing, the club head starts to overtake the hands. That's a very, very common thing we're seeing with a lot of people who are teaching the shallow swing. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, where did these Japanese instructors get this overall motion from? Did they just kind of, wish it into thin air? That's actually not necessarily true. Most likely, they probably originated with Mac O'Grady, who was going to be the person who came up with the golf machinist, let's call it methodology. Let's just call it that. But basically, what happened here was they were talking about having this, what they call float and load, which just means that if you can do this, the center mass of the club head is lagging behind the hands so that in transition, you're now going to see the club head want to move behind the hands, and that's going to allow you to get more lag and you're not going to get the early release. Or basically, it's a better way, kinematic standpoint, to swing the golf club. Now, if we go transfer over to the American way now, what they're typically teaching with the takeaway, you're going to see a pretty massive difference. So now when you talk about the float and load takeaway, that concept pretty much was non-existent after maybe late 1990s, I'd say. Pretty much when Tiger Woods came out on the scene, he became popular. Butch Harmon became more of the dominant figure when it came to golf instruction. You pretty much saw any type of talks of this float and load takeaway pretty much go out the window because Butch was really not a big fan of it. So explaining Butch's theory on the takeaway, he's really trying to get the center mass of the club head and the center of mass of the hands to line up at specific points throughout the takeaway section, in the transition area, and then ultimately as we start to approach the golf ball. So his theory was, if we were to float and load, what would happen here is, if the club head got this way on the backswing, and then this way on the downswing, what would happen is the hands would get too far ahead of the club head or handle drag at this point in the golf swing, and it'd be almost impossible to square the face up if you were to do the float and load. Now, personally, I think if you had very good timing with this float and load takeaway, you could get the club head and the center mass of the hands to line up at the right times and actually hit the golf ball quite well. But I would say for the most part, I do agree with Butch. The more and more people I see do this, typically when they're on their own, they cannot repeat the motion consistently. And it has to do with the same thing Butch said. So it tends to get the club head behind the hands too much for too long, and then they start to realign too late. So what happens is the hands get ahead of the club head way too much, and then they have a difficult time squaring the face. So in America, we actually like to get the center mass of the club head and the hands to align closer to right around P1.5, which would be a little bit more this position right here. So this would be the center mass of the hands, and the club head are going to be aligned here. Then from here, we start to get the center mass of the club head a little bit more behind the hands, but not too much to where you feel like the club is heavy. And then from here, as we come down, we're going to have the center of mass of the hands realign right around P6.5, which then in turn allows it much easier to get the club head to catch up to the hands. But again, just like I said, that would be the American way. I'm not necessarily saying the American way is better. I'm not saying the float and load is better. I think either can work if you get the timings correct. My personal opinion, and again, this is not factual, it's just my personal opinion, I would much rather have the center of mass of the club head aligned to the hands much quicker on the takeaway, get control of the club head quicker, because I personally think it's easier to direct the club on the backswing and the downswing. My clients have typically had a lot better dispersion charts whenever they start to have the takeaway more so in that way. But that would definitely be a highlight of the Japanese shallow swing. So now another key highlight of the shallow swing here in Japan, and again, this is not what everyone teaches here in Japan, guys. Give me a break here. This is just what most of them would teach. As you're actually starting to flatten the club shaft or shallow the club shaft, one of the big key highlights is going to be with the overall pelvis movement. As you probably heard in videos, you want to get the pelvis as open as you possibly can, as early as you possibly can, and then from here, try to keep the chest closed as long as you possibly can. And if you do that, you're going to have a very stable rate of closure, right? You're not going to be flipping a whole lot, and you're going to hit the golf ball really, really well, right? That's a key highlight point. Now, when it comes to the American concept on this, I think it's actually quite different, but some instructors are still quite similar to what you would see taught in Japan. So let me kind of explain the differences. All right, that's it for you guys on YouTube, but before you guys click off, let me give you some quick wrap-up points. So I know when I talked about this video, I gave you the differences between kind of the American shallow swing, you could call it, and then the Japanese shallow swing. So you guys are probably left with a lot of information. You kind of understand really distinctly the differences between the two, but you probably don't have any actual steps to take. So you're feeling a little hopeless maybe if you guys were doing the swing before, and you really don't know what to do first. So here's my recommendation to you guys. Find yourself a professional golfer, maybe on Instagram, maybe on YouTube. Find a slow motion swing from the down the line camera angle first. I want you guys to start off with maybe the setup all the way to kind of halfway back on the backswing. Pick out maybe one motion for each of those positions. So one motion for setup, one motion for the takeaway, one motion for when the arm is parallel to the ground. Try to change those, give yourself 1,000, 2,000 golf balls, and try to do maybe our how much and when process, which if you guys didn't necessarily watch that video yet, we do have it on our YouTube channel, so there'll be a link for that in the description below. But go ahead and follow that route, see where it leads you, and I think you might get better results than just watching a bunch of videos on the shallow swing and not really having anything to really work on. So if you guys still are struggling for swings after that, well then check out the Kiwi Code 6-month program. We just launched our new instructor, Hiroshi-san. So for all of you guys out there that want to take lessons from me, and you probably know by now that my schedule is completely booked and we have no more availabilities, check out Hiroshi-san then. He just launched his waiting list. There's 10 available spots. If you sign up, you can get an access to a free Kiwi Platinum Lifetime membership with over 260 videos on our site, so check that out. And then also you can win a free round of golf, 9-hole playing lesson with Hiroshi-san and myself if you're one of those top 10 people and you win the raffle that we're gonna be having for that. So check it out, tell your friends, like, comment, subscribe, share, all that good stuff, and I'll see you guys in the next video.